The desk is not the center of the world. I challenge the assumption that sitting quietly equals healthy learning. Most people assume that if a child sits at a desk, pencil in hand, looking on task, then learning must be happening. But developmental molecular biologist John Medina, the author of Brain Rules book, said, if you were to design an almost perfect anti-brain learning environment, it would look something like this. Children were not designed to sit still for long periods of time. In school, children are expected to sit in a chair without moving, stare forward, listen, don't talk, don't move, stay on task. But children are not brains on sticks. They are whole people. They need movement, oxygen, sensory input, connection, and real experience. There are many ways to learn, but if we limit children to only the things that they can learn at a desk, we are placing very heavy constraints on what's possible for them to learn. Some of the most powerful learning happens when kids are walking, touching, exploring, noticing, climbing, visiting, building, playing, and experiencing the real world. In authentic learning, time away from the desk is not a break from learning. It is often where the deepest learning begins. We don't take the students away from the desk because learning is over. We take them away from the desk because real learning is far, far bigger than the desk. The longer a child sits passively, the more likely attention and processing begin to fade. Movement is not the enemy of learning. Movement magnifies learning. Children should not be sitting for hours a day. They need to move in order to be active participants in the learning process. Educator Jarek Jensen said that physical activity supports the brain by increasing oxygen, glucose, and neural connections. Students who move and exercise tend to do better in school. So why not put them together? Movement wakes up the brain. Movement gives restless students a productive outlet. Movement helps students reset their attention, and movement makes learning more memorable because the body becomes part of the experience. So instead of reading about measurement, measure the playground. Instead of reading about maps, walk a route and draw it. Instead of reading about force, go ahead and push, pull, roll, and test objects. Instead of only learning vocabulary at a desk, act out the words because students need to move to learn. But symbols are not enough. Desk learning often relies too heavily on symbols, such as letters, numbers, diagrams, and written descriptions. These are all very important. I'm not downplaying that, but should not be the whole of learning. Here's an example. I'm going to read to you the description of this animal. These are echinoderms and typically have a central disc and 5 arms. The arboreal surface may be smooth, granular, or spiny and is covered with overlapping plates. If you did not already know what a starfish looks like, you might have no idea what I'm describing, even though it is an accurate description. Because words can be confusing without more. So if this is your classroom and you're teaching about starfish, you might put a couple pictures of starfish up on the wall, and that's great. You might not even need as many words if you can show what it looks like. Even better though, you bring in a model of a starfish and you can pass this around and students can examine it to get a better understanding. Even better than that, why not the real object? Bring a real starfish in. This provides a more accurate sensory input. So even better still, what if you had an immersive classroom experience? Imagine you create a beach environment in the classroom and you drag in a touch tank and the children get to touch the real thing in an environment that simulates the real home of the starfish. But of course, you might know where I'm going because this is not the absolute best way to learn about starfish. It might be go there, have a being there experience. You visit real tide pools and observe the starfish in their natural habitat. You feel the wind on your face, you hear the smell of the ocean, you touch the rocks, you see all the other sea creatures that live adjacent to the starfish because we're experiencing it with all of our senses. And the closer we get to the real thing, the richer the learning becomes. And not only that, but something else happens. Lots and lots of questions, way more questions than simply providing a description of a starfish to the kids, right? I divide time away from the desk into two categories, outings and rec time. First, I'll talk about outings. I call it being there experiences. Um, because the best learning often happens when students are actually there. A being there experience is when students encounter the subject in a real or highly realistic setting. It could be a museum, a tide pool, a farm, a courthouse, a historical site, a garden, a creek, a nature trail, a theater, a workshop, a bakery, a fire station, a cultural festival, a construction site, a business, a local town business, could be a science center, or even a community event. When the students are there, they are learning with all their senses. They see the size, color, texture, movement, sound, smell, and context of the thing. They notice details no worksheet could ever attempt to cover. And they ask better questions. They remember more. They go home and say, guess what I saw? Or did you know? And they tell you something that they learned, even though they might tell you they learned nothing. Anyway, because they were just experiencing and having a great time. But this is a sign that learning became personally meaningful to them. When students are really there, learning becomes something they want to tell everyone about. So outings are not just extras. Outings should not be treated as rewards or fluff. In authentic learning, outings are integral. They are part of the curriculum. They give students background knowledge. They create shared experiences. They make vocabulary meaningful. They give students something real to write about. They spark questions for research. They inspire projects. They help students connect the weekly theme to the real world. And to expand on the experience while on an outing, so not always, but often, students can go ahead and take extra time to look at something in the real environment. They can sketch, they can photograph, they can compare. If possible, they can touch, and they can spend extra time asking questions from experts right then, right there. And outing, of course, is also not the end of the learning experience. It's often the beginning of deeper learning. Time away from the desk gives purpose to desk work later. After the outing, students can write in their journals about what they did. They can do research, they can create models, build displays, make presentations, make maps, measure distances, write stories, read books about the topic, and work on long-term projects. For example, after visiting the tide pools, they can read books about tide pools. They can journal about what they saw there, their favorite part about it. They can research a creature that they're curious about, and they can make a diagram of a tide pool. So now reading, writing, science, art, research, they all have a purpose. They all have meaning. They all have some information that they connect back to the real world, and it makes so much sense. The real experiences give students something worth reading, writing, calculating, and thinking about. Of course, these activities, like the rest of authentic learning system, need to be meaningful and they need to be wanted by the students. Okay, so the second part of the time away from desks is rec time. You might know rec time by one of its other names like downtime, recess, or free time. But for thousands of years of world history, this wouldn't have even been something that needed to be discussed because children just played. But for some reason these days, parents tend to feel like they need to fill every hour of a child's day. And the time when the day isn't taken up by school, after school activities, homework, play dates, and other appointments, children are on screens. Now, I am not going to roll out to you all the facts about how lots of time on screens at school or at home is damaging to kids. You don't need the stats. You already know kids should not be spending hours a day on screens. So what will the kids do once the screens are off limits? This is where rec time comes in. A school might call it recess, but I want you to know how important this unstructured time is, both at home and at school. I call it rec time or recreation. It's recreating yourself. The children remember who they are. And these are the things that kids do naturally when their time is not stolen by plans and screens. It is not wasted time. It helps students move their bodies, build friendships, practice cooperation, develop leadership, process what they are learning. Sometimes the information can't even be downloaded without the downtime. It helps them to reset their attention. It helps them use their imagination to solve social problems and even to return to the academics more ready to focus. But also, there are specific things that your kids will choose to do in their rec time. And these are REC. R stands for several things. One is read. Let her choose the books and read for as long as she likes. Research. When he's curious about something, let him go down a rabbit hole until he's satisfied. Relax. Just chilling off of screens is fine. She doesn't need to fill every minute of her day with things that you value, okay? E stands for exercise. Let him play pickup games, chase friends around, or go on bike rides without motors. Let them play on the playground or whatever gets them moving. E stands for also explore. This is opportunities for her to see and interact with real things, even those things in a playground or a backyard. Let her curiosity lead the way. Experiment. Children are natural scientists. They are always wondering, what'll happen if I do this? Or what's going to happen? They naturally perform experiments because they're curious. Let them perform all the experiments, the safe experiments that they want to. And express. This is when children want to share the things they discover. Sometimes she wants to talk, and sometimes she'll write. Expressing herself can come actually in many forms. And that leads us to C, create. This is when she expresses herself through a creative outlet. It could be sketching, building, dancing, music. There are many ways to be creative, whatever helps her come alive. And finally, connect. This is when he spends time with friends and family, including participating with them on any of the activities that I've already listed. Now, I want to give you a little bit of a warning. I don't want you to treat rack time as something to eliminate when the schedule gets tight. Often, the students who seem least focused are the ones who most need movement, play, and connection. If they can't focus anymore, if you're just trying to squeeze out a little bit more, maybe just plain let them go, let them play, come back another time. Okay, rec time is not a pause in education. It is part of the whole child and part of the learning cycle. But what can you do to help facilitate the outings, this powerful time away from desks, right? You will need to be the one to arrange the outings. As a bonus to you, I'll put a link to my field trip planning guide in the description below. It might feel counterintuitive, but these activities that I've been talking about, in these activities, your biggest job is actually getting out of the way. Let each of the children make the experiences personal as they participate in ways that make the most sense to themselves. So remember to avoid talking about the things too much. Allow the experience to speak for itself. Of course, if you have the answers to some of their questions, go for it. But don't take over, right? Let the experience speak for itself. Let the students observe. Sometimes they want to stay in front of a single display at a museum for an entire hour. Let them. You know your children, and if you notice something that you think they might like to see, go ahead and point it out, but don't be the one to direct all their attention in an experience. Don't become impatient. Don't be bossy, right? Okay, also listen to their comments. You can use the things that they talk about, the things they discuss, the things they're interested in. You might get some ideas for things that you can do at home or in class from the things that they talk about. And back in class, you can share connections you notice between an outing back to projects, writing, research, and discussion. Encourage the students to also share the connections they notice. So for during rec time, you can watch for their social dynamics. You can encourage inclusion. You can notice leadership and creativity. You can help students solve conflicts when necessary. You can protect students from teasing or exclusion, and you can look for sparks of interest, and you can celebrate the healthy ways that they engage in play. So during outings and rec time, you're not just supervising, you can observe, listen, and watch for the sparks. So this week, next time you're with the kids, you can look at your lesson plans, and I want you to ask these questions of yourself. Where can the students move? Where can they touch something real? Where can they go? Where can they observe something firsthand? Where can they play, build, test, explore, or collaborate? Replace a flat description with a real experience, right? A full, authentic learning experience does not happen without the things that happen away from the desk, because learning can and should happen everywhere. It happens in museums, gardens, parks, libraries, theaters, trails, workshops, kitchens, creeks, playgrounds, and even in simple conversations. It happens when children are on their feet. It happens when they are immersed in the real world. And very often it happens when they come home and say, guess what I did today? Or guess what I saw? This is when you know real learning is happening. I hope you can make the most out of each child's school years by helping them get away from their desks. In the next video, I'm going to talk about ways in which you can help to draw out the genius for the children in your life. I'll see you then.